I'm very happy to be able to share my little ideas, suspicions, and questions with you. This is really an invitation to experiment. What I will try to share here is mostly some kind of questions that emerged in the few weeks I am here with you. So it's something fresh, more or less relatively fresh for me. It's linked obviously with my previous work, rituals, relations between humans, animals, and non-humans, artifacts, architecture, and music. But I'm trying to take these elements and to put them in a different situation, a different constellation, in order to deal with these problems we have been discussing lately. So I will begin. I wanted to call first about something that is being by a specialist entitled extirpación de idolatrías, the extirpation of idolatry. The bibliography is huge. There are many perspectives. I'm not a specialist into it, but as an anthropologist working on the highlands of South America, it is very common to find reference to this sort of big operation or big projects that took place in the highlands in a sort of hysteric moment in which missionaries, priests, religious specialists from Spain wanted to be sure, wanted to recheck how Indians, los indios, how that was the term they invented in that moment to call Amerindian populations, how the Indians were or not really becoming Catholic. So that was, thanks to them, we have many of the most important works about Amerindian worlds, Amerindian, the first accounts of Amerindian mythology is because of this movement. The main descriptions of the rituals is also because of this movement. But the movement was an intent to finally destroy the last remnant of what could be a non-Christian religion in the Andes, non-Catholic religions, or as they call it, the religion of the earth, of the land, the religion of the land, la religión de la tierra. So, why am I evoking the extirpation of idolatry? Because in my perspective, this has created very successfully until now a narrative that is shared not only with inside ethnohistory, but also in the ethnography of the vast Andes area. And this narrative is one in which the concept of resistance, of survival is very strong. The main idea is that despite all the efforts to convert indigenous people in the Andes, they were still hiding, they were still in the background, keeping in resistance some elements, important elements of what was a previous religion for them. And this narrative of resistance is being so powerful that it has also found its place among ethnography and then studies about contemporary people today. And they have become entering into the arena of politics immediately. You probably know that some republics in South America, in their new constitutions, they have asserted also this idea that there is today a religious idea about the earth that is around the idea of respecting Mother Earth, for instance. And this has given also place to the idea of right of nature, which is today a whole trend. So back to the extirpation of idolatry, 17th century, the idea of resistance and survival. This idea is parallel to another one, the one that is on below, which is much less, I would say, known, but is very strong also in Amerindian studies. That says that indigenous peoples are actually a group of people with a tendency to adopt foreign elements, to constantly take what is foreign and inserted in a sort of nucleus that they keep intact. So there is also some sort of romantic ideas about something that is intact there. But here there's nothing about resistance. It's the idea that no, it's on the contrary, absorption of new things. Now, I will try to go a little bit, little by little, into my own perspective on these problems or issues, taking into account my own field, my own experience among Quechua indigenous people in two areas of the Andes. I will show a map later. But just a little note, it's true, I say that I have in my own heritage, in my own family, indigenous people, but none of these areas where I have done my fieldwork are the area where my ascendants come from. It's more or less 1,000 kilometers far north, and the other is also very far. But so it's something we can call Quechua, but it's actually a huge term to talk about different 6 languages in the area. Instead of resistance or a sort of conservative approach from the people, what I found during my fieldwork was something different, a concept that has been also underlined by some other ethnographers, which is curiosidad. It's a Spanish term that has been adopted in Quechua languages to talk about an attitude that would allow people, anyone who would be interested, to obtain the knowledge that they need in order, for instance, to cure somebody, to heal people that is sick from witchery, or to address non-human entities that could help us to different kind of tasks, increasing fertility in animals, a good birth of a new child, etc. So, in principle, as is written also below, anyone who will be curious enough, suficientemente curioso, will be able to obtain this knowledge. There is no barrier apart of your own interest into this knowledge. That was my experience. Sometimes there are some local intellectuals that at the same time are advisors of NGOs, and they begin to adopt this discourse on, yes, we are resisting because we respect our culture and our own divinities. But this usually stays restricted to these school teachers or people who is working as translators or state agencies. I will take 2 different examples for what could be a hidden, a practice of concealment, something that is actually important that is being kept as a hidden thing, occult. As you might have already suspected, there is, for me, a sort of exceptionality in the attitude of keeping something for a restricted circle. If there is curiosity, you can access to it. But I found 2 cases, thinking about my own fieldwork data, 2 cases in which this is actually happening. There is a restriction of knowledge, and I wanted to see what would be the reason for this. And my first idea was that it had something to do with what I call verticality. That would be maybe better understand it a bit later. Unequal relations, intention, involving people who are struggling one with the other, with different interests. I will try to make this rather vague statement more clear with 2 cases. One is involving sound, ritual music and ritual singing, and the other is involving mythology, the mythology about a specific type of monster in the Andes. And in both cases come from my second area of fieldwork, which took place here. It's an area without really a proper name. I call it Cañaris area, but as many anthropologists, I have to confess that it's an invention. There's probably 50% of them will agree that they are Cañaris, but the other ones, the other half will say, no, I am Incawasi, I am Penachi, I am Hayanka. The identity ascription is very much a little town of no more than 20 houses. Nevertheless, from a perspective of anthropologists, they share the same languages, the same music, the same aesthetics, same symbols, etc. So that's why I took still the idea of that they are Cañaris there. They are really dispersed among 3 different political ascriptions, so they're very much invisible for the Peruvian state and also for Andean ethnography. This is how it looks like, the Cañaris area. It goes from 2,000 meters above the sea to almost 5,000. It's a very vertical, but that's not the sense of vertical. I mean, it's a very vertical area. This is the people. They are Cañaris women. They're looking at me and they're curious. Who is this anthropologist? That's the aesthetic. But there are, of course, very specific variations. You can know because of how they are dressing, if they are married, widow, or single, and from which specific town they are coming. The area is, I want to say this because it looks like a very typical Andean area. For these 2 pictures, could be Cusco also. But despite this appearance, they have some things that are not so common. I already said that they are in contrast with Cusco, Machu Picchu, and all this south area. They are very much invisible. People that is living 100 kilometers down the coast doesn't know there is something called Cañaris, and there is a language that is Quechua. They are really very ignorant. And among Andean these anthropologists that traditionally have been focusing on what they think is the Indian part of South America, the northern, where Cañaris is located, is not in the radar. There are not, the bibliography about Cañaris is not more than 50 pages, maybe. Also, the so-called hacienda system, in which a landlord, mostly of Spanish origin, was the owner of most of the land and had the indigenous people as almost slaves or servants inside these lands, is not so predominant in the area. Most strikingly, the shining path, the Maoist guerrilla that was almost going to take the power in Peru until the 90s, was not operating in this area, so they were free from all the violence and the almost officially 70,000 people killed, most of them indigenous Quechua-speaking people as they are, but they were not in the area. For some reason, they didn't choose to enter, despite the Maoist thesis that the revolution had to come from outside the city. There is no coca, another symbol almost of what is an Andean culture. They don't consume it, they don't do anything with coca. The language is very strong, the indigenous language is very strong, and they have also musical instruments that are considered to be, for what we knew about ethnomusicology in the Andes, impossible. There are, for instance, traverse flutes that are played only by women, when the case is exactly the contrary all over the Andes. There's no Pachamama or Mother Earth idea here. They have other entities in their cosmology. And also there is a very strange temple. This is a Catholic temple today that was built against the law in the 17th century to take land from another landowner. Some old pictures taken by the German explorer called Heinrich Brüning at the beginning of the 20th century appeared also this temple. The temple is much considered as a living entity. The columns have their own personality. They carve faces in the columns outside of the temple in these columns. Each is a living entity. They have to change the roof every 10 years. It's a huge community collective ritual. And many rituals, of course, inside this place also. With music, always with music. Finally, the temple is treated as not only a living entity as a whole, but specifically as a child. The rituals they perform with the architecture of the building are the same that you perform when you want the child to begin to enter into the realm of humanity, of the proper human beings. Children are not human beings from the start. It's not an acquired condition. It's a It's something that you have to get little by little. One of the steps is a ritual called Hutuchikwi, and it's the same one they perform with the church. So the first example would be what I call soundscape. Here I found moments and a specific ritual in which, through darkness and unintelligible words, they on purpose try to hide something from the others. It might be important to listen to it maybe at the first. Let me see if you can help me with one of the videos. It's called Curandero. The curandero, or the sorcerer, he performs a specific ritual, which is called mesa, mostly every night. In this case, he wanted to treat a person that is next to him, next to us. But at some point, and you will see this moment, I hope, he finds that it's important that everything is impossible to see, that he needs total darkness. He has always words, and he's beginning to take the agua de Jayanca. And all this part is performed in silence. But once the sound will begin, he will ask darkness. Now he will wake up the patient and the assistant. It can last the whole night. It starts at 6 p.m. more or less, and it ends up morning. So once the litany will begin, it will last hours. I don't know, he talks to me in Spanish. He says, "Puedes apagar?" He turns off the candle and he says, "Can you please turn off your machine?" And then stops and he begins the singing of this. So you could hear there is a maraca. So in this moment, there was this requirement of darkness. And the same instruments are used in a public rituals. in the middle of the town, in front of the church. But here they will add something different. That for me was when I began to relate both things was very striking for me. I don't know if you can see. Can we see the PowerPoint this time, please? Public ritual probably is also this one that Hans Bruning took a picture of at the beginning of the 20th century. But we don't have sound of that. Bruning made some recordings in wax cylinders, but they were lost during the war. But the ritual, the public ritual, in which there is the same instrument, and there's also a monk who's playing, is this one. And in this one, as you can see, it's made during daylight in front of everybody. But it is played along with the song. The song is the one we have transcribed here to the left in Quechua. And to the right is the one attempts a linguist has done along with me to translate this song. Everything that is in this bold is untranslatable. It's not only that it is untranslatable because of the recording, we compare different versions, we ask different people, but mostly because it uses words that are there expressly to mean nothing or to the listeners. Nobody knows what are these words, what are the meanings of these words. And the only one who knows how to sing it are these specialists, Healer and he, who strangely enough is called Little Mother. It's always a man who can perform this ritual. But the ritual name he gets is Mother, always, Mamita. So I wanted to hear also the song. There are people passing by, so it's totally a casual moment. It's just, there's no idea that there is something that should not be seen, as was the case of the killer. Here, instead, if you ask that, we are asked also that women, I talked to her many times, and the other people that listen, or anybody who listens to it said, I don't understand what he's saying. I understand when he starts speaking in Quechua, perfect. But then he begins to speak in something I don't understand, and nobody's using this language anymore. And the performer himself, he said that he memorized these words because that was the way they were singing it before, the previous specialists before him, but he doesn't know either what this can mean. So for me, there were probably two equivalent ways of using masks, I would say. One is this, and the other is this. In one, you cannot know what is being said, and in the other, you cannot see what is actually happening. And both were, for me, more or less equivalent ways to hide. It is not here, but around 1925, two psychologists, they were called psychologists in Peru, Baldizan and Maldonado, were interested in indigenous ways to heal people. And they were visiting curandero, this type of specialist, as W. Logio, the first one, the one that wanted obscurity. And in 1925, they recorded that the healer was using this song also, the jaynallo, that one. Today it's over, they make only the litany. But there are some records of, and not only the maraca, and the position of all men in both situations, but also it seems that the song was shared between both rituals. So they will be an aerial and a visual form of concealment. That's what I wanted to stress. And in both, I wanted to underline the idea of verticality and conflict. Conflict in the case that a healer, a brujo, has mainly to deal with accusation. If you fall ill and you need to go to a brujo, it cannot be but one case, that somebody is harmed in you, that you are being the victim of somebody else. So the healer is intervening into immediately already a tension, a conflict, a sort of magic battle between two members of the community. And in the case of the words in the song that nobody understands and are there for precisely not to be understood, it's difficult to find similar things in the highlands, but in the lowlands of South America, we have more than one case in which authorities, the kind of authorities they have, use his position in order to accompany this position with the same sort of ritual speech with vocabulary that the others cannot understand. But the comparison between highlands and lowlands is not very much developed yet, and I have to look more into these details. But I saw a sort of conflict and verticality in both interest in concealment. But I will try to address now the second aspect, which deals with mythology. And this is an entity that is called achiké. It can have many other names depending on the region, Achka, Arcaica, Mamahuaca in Ecuador also. And it can be, it is mostly female, but it can be also male. It's in this case called Wacom. The more or less canonic story about achiké or this sorcerer, it's called bruja, is that while people in those times were starving, didn't have anything to eat or didn't have fire to cook, she or he, depending if it's the achiké or the wacom, were the only owners of the fire, or they were wealthy, they had food, etc. And it begins to devour the victims. But at the end is defeated by humans. There you have an image of the wacom, the main version, and it has a ritual associated with wacom. And the victims in a book, the Summary Institute for Linguistics published some years ago, the victims are usually children. Here I wanted to make an analysis of this complex of mythology from taking perspectivism as a background theory. Probably you are not very much familiar with this anthropological theory that is more or less recent. It's associated with the ontological term, with the so-called new animism, and it's been discussed greatly by Philippe Descola, Bruno Latour, the late Bruno Latour, Marshall Salles, also the late Marshall Salles. But the main proposer is the Brazilian anthropologist Viveros de Castro. I won't try to explain how perspectivism operating, but I will try just to extract the main idea that is interesting for me in order to understand what's happening with the mythology of this monster called achiké. What perspectivism proposes is that, as in new animism, all the entities of the world are persons, artifacts, animals, trees, all of them are persons, and people, humans, have social relations with elements of the world, stars, mountains, stones, even. So you have social relations with them. They are all subjects. But until that is animism or new animism. That is, for instance, the scholar. But what perspectivism adds to this setting is that each of these elements or each of these subjects sees itself as a human. So the jaguar, that's the canonical example, the jaguar sees himself as a human. And when the jaguar is drinking blood, he sees the blood as beer. He's drinking beer. But when the jaguar sees a human, he will see this human as an animal, as a prey, as a pig, for instance. So he goes and kills a pig, according to him. According to us, is a jaguar man. So in perspectivism, each subject of the world, each element, is using the same language. All of them are humans. All of them think they are the only humans. And they see all the others as prey or predators, depending on the position in the alimentary chain. That is perspectivism. It's been researched by Viveros de Castro, Stolz de Lima, and many other Americans. There are some examples from Papua New Guinea, from Asia, and Russia also. It's still on the making, you would say. But Viveros de Castro has given it also a political dimension that I won't go into it now. The idea is, for me, that for what we know about the Andean mythology, if we applied a perspectivist approach, that will explain something that for me was always very, very strange, going into the mythology of monsters, achiké, or the Pishtaco, which is he is a person that, with the permission of the state, cuts your body and extracts the fat of your body in order to make the machines of the world work. Trains work because they use human fat. Or the condenado, which is the sort of soul that wants to devour people, but is insatiable because every time he eats, all the food flows again through a hole in the neck, etc. But all these entities, these aggressive entities, if they devour their victims, it's because the victim cannot see them as monsters. It's because the victim sees them as humans. So the canonical topic is that there was, for instance, a woman that had lost his husband, and he was working alone with a baby in his back, suffering. And then suddenly his dead husband appears, and she is stricken, but she says, oh, he talks like his husband, he looks like his husband. So for some reason, she accepts that it's his husband. And the story goes until she's at the point of being devoured by this entity. And it happens so when she stays in this perspective. But once, for the help of a plant, sometimes a relative, there are many varieties of this mythology. If she is able to see that it's not his husband, but it's a monster, then it's very easy to defeat this monster. She can even manipulate the monster, and she saves herself. So for me, this moment of change was, and for many other who have studied Andean mythology, is a sort of a strange shift in the canonical versions. If we apply perspectivism, and this, as I said at the beginning, this is a very fresh thing. I'm not sure if I'm going in the right direction, but let's say they have already applied perspectivism to many other cases in the highlands, but not to mythology yet. But if we apply this, it could be explained as a switch in the perspective of the victim. The victim is killed by the monster only if she stays under the imposition of the perspective or the point of view of the monster. This is a totally Amazonian way to say things, because perspectivism has been developed in Amazonian societies where the predator and prey relationship is hypothesized as the center of or model of relationships. It's different in the highlands, but for me it was making sense. If I am right, so we would have again verticality and conflict in the stories of the achiké or other monsters. And then we will have two different ethnographic samples. And sound, the other involving mythological figures. In both cases, we will have the stress in verticality, either for formal authority, in the case of the ritual speech that cannot be understood, is made it on purpose with foreign or invented vocabulary, either in the form of social tensions. In this case, that is the case of the witch, the healer that didn't want me to film and turn off all the lights while he was singing his litany, or in predatory rationalities, as in perspectivism, that is called also multinaturalism, in which there is a predator and a prey, and the predator is only a predator if he managed to impose his perspective on his victim. So he cannot see that he's a predator. And to end, as a final comment, this is a bit out of the topic of verticality, but I was thinking also on the possibility that the practitioner could be conceptualized in order to involve non-humans. And for the two examples that I gave, they will be musical instruments, as the maracas, the drums. It will be sounds, either music or voice, or the monsters. In the Andean region, at least, all of them are subjects with their own intentionalities. So for me, that was a problem for trying to understand, for instance, Dom Eulogio or the healer as the only practitioners. Would he be the correct, in this case, to think of him as a practitioner and not the maraca, that is also here a bit in the darkness? That's another question, but it's not the main one. For me, we're trying to understand what could be the purpose of hiding or concealing some knowledge in the area where I did my fieldwork. I found examples that were always related with some sort of verticality, some sort of tension, conflict, or as the Brazilian anthropologist Viveiros de Castro would say, the dynamics of predator and prey. And that was what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your patience.